What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? Years ago when I was 8, my family lived in this big weird house kind of on the edge of a small town. The school district was in the middle of a big restructuring, so even though we were only a couple grades apart, my brother and I went to different schools and took different buses. This left me as the last person to leave in the morning and the first person to get home in the afternoon, which meant it was my job to make sure all the lights were off and the door was locked. One morning I noticed the basement door was open and the light was on, so before I left I turned off the light and closed the door. When I got home that afternoon, the light was on and the door was open again. I just assumed that I'd forgotten to actually take care of it when I noticed it in the morning, so I went over to turn off the light and close the door. When I got to the top of the basement stairs, I looked and there was a big shadowy male figure towards the bottom of the staircase. I freaked out, slammed the door, and pushed a bunch of boxes against it and then went and hid in my closet. For months, I didn't tell my family because I was positive what I had seen was a ghost and didn't think anyone would believe me. Then about a year after that incident, my mom and her boyfriend realized that small amounts of money had been going missing for months, totaling around $800 to $900, but never more than $60 at once. So we all walked around the house with flashlights trying to figure out how they could have gotten in. Turns out some creep was climbing in through a small hole in the outside of the house, shimmying through a crawl space, then coming up into the house through the basement. Realizing I had been alone in the house with him on at least one occasion was one of the worst, most terrifying moments I've ever had. Home invasion is seriously one of the scariest things that can happen to a person. The home is like a final refuge from the world, and to have it violated like that is so unnerving. My brother's ex-GF had 2 older sisters. They died before she was born. One day they decided to play hide and seek or something, so anyway, they both climbed inside a chest and accidentally locked themselves in. They suffocated. That is terrifying. It's particularly terrifying to me because I remember when I was younger something similar almost happened to me and my cousin. She had a day bed and we decided to get behind it and push it against the wall so we could play and nap in the dark. It got unbearably hot and we realized we couldn't breathe after about 30 minutes. If it wouldn't have also gotten so hot from our fear, body heat, lack of oxygen, we might have actually suffocated because we were getting lightheaded. It was scary, but eventually, we pulled the bed away from the wall. I have no idea how that could happen on carpet. Bizarre freak accidents are just so strange. I am truly sorry for you brothers XGF. 80-year-old dude at my grandfather's church went swimming when he was a kid in an old mining quarry with his cousin. They were both kids like 7 to 10. Long story short, the some mine or air bubble down below the water opened up and swallowed the cousin. He had to walk back home and tell his family. They got a search and rescue down there and could never find the boy. In college, I lived in a house with a bunch of other students I didn't know, so we all had our own groups of friends, but nonetheless we ended up becoming pretty close. For spring break, one of my new housemates went to Panama with a few of her friends that I also knew. When she got back, I noticed one of her friends had some pretty bad cold sores around her mouth. College and STDs are a pretty common occurrence, especially in a frat, sorority-type environment. A few days later, I asked my housemate how her trip was and she told me this. There was a guy who was from Panama they kept running into on the beach that was insistently pursuing her friend. She got flirty with him and he met up with them a couple of times on their resort, and each time he would ask her to come home with him. She refused every night to be safe, and one night there she gave in and let him come up to her room. The next time they met, he gave her his information and told her that if she trusted him now, she should spend her last night with him at his house. Well, she never went, thankfully. When they got back, his friend wanted to go to the walk-in clinic on campus because she was really itchy down there and her cold sores were getting worse, so my housemate went with her for moral support. She told me the doctor was in shock because he said he has never seen it, but only read about it. He asked if she maybe kissed the locals and any other contact. She said yes. Turns out she contracted some type of necrosis that is most commonly seen in studies of people who are necrophiliacs, so he had passed that on to her. He ended up having to contact the authorities, and she was in some kind of court case for over a year. But turns out they were able to find the guy she slept with, and when they did, they found multiple dead bodies of women who were missing tourists in his basement that he was sleeping with. So my dad is super skeptical about anything paranormal. He doesn't believe in ghosts or demons or anything like that. Very rational, logical person, not afraid of much. He grew up in the countryside of Cuba. He and his family were farmers. One afternoon he was out doing something in the fields, and it was getting dark as he walked back. When he got closer to home, it was pretty much complete darkness minus the moonlight, so he could make out enough to get through. Plus he was very familiar with the land, so he was fine. Suddenly he said he smelled a very strong stench of rotting meat. He walked around some trees, and when he came to the clearing before his house, he saw a creature standing there. He described it as a horse with no head. No open fleshy wound or anything. It was smooth and had fur on it, but no head. And it was standing, but as he walked around it to take a better look, he said it wasn't breathing. He said it filled him with so much fear and dread that he took off running. He had goosebumps as he was telling me the story. Many other family members witnessed some strange things on that land, but this one always shook me the most because my father doesn't believe in these things, and he sure as hell doesn't joke about them. And it just sounds creepy as hell. Late to the game, but here goes. This was told to me by a family friend about a friend of hers. This friend had a pet reticulated python. You know, those absolutely giant constrictor snakes. This snake was her baby, and being that snakes live a surprisingly long time, she'd had it for years. At night, the snake would sleep with her, curled up at the foot of her bed like a dog. But suddenly the snake's behavior started to change. It wasn't eating well, really at all. It had become more active than it normally was. And at night, instead of sleeping curled up at the foot of her bed, it stretched itself along the length of the woman's body. Being that this was her dearest companion, the woman took the snake to the vet. This was Los Angeles. Exotic pets are very common down there, and the vet told her, quite sternly, to get rid of or destroy the snake. When the woman asked why, the vet explained, your snake is preparing to eat you. It has been fasting and measuring your body to see if you would fit inside of it. The snake was gone by the next day. No one will probably read this, but in 2004, Pennsylvania, me and my friends were obsessed with going into abandoned buildings, caves, and sewers. I think we were looking for some excitement. One day during fall we decided to go down a manhole that was left open by the city. Me and my old buddy David climbed down because my other buddies Joe, Chris, and Skylar chickened out. We got down the ladder, and it's exactly how you expect. A long dark tunnel with a sewage stream down the middle. I had brought my older brother's military-looking angle-head flashlight with me, and we started walking down the sewers a little bit. After yelling back to our friends to come down and stop being scared, something grabbed my coat on my arm and tugged it back. I pulled away and pushed into David and told him to run. I can't describe the sound I heard as I was running, but I swear it was wheezing. We told our friends, but they didn't believe us, of course. Eventually, I forgot about this, and I recently moved to Wisconsin a couple of years ago. I just found out David died July 2018, and all of a sudden I remembered this traumatizing memory. I have felt an eerie feeling of doom lately, and I can't help but think it's related to this incident. Even typing, I have goosebumps. Was it a monster? Was it a homeless person? Was it a pendo worker trying to scare us? I didn't imagine it, and I'm currently doing research to see if there are other reports of wheezing creatures in the sewers of Pennsylvania. This is a little long, but I think it qualifies as scary. My two young daughters share a room and sleep in a queen-sized bed together. They have never liked sleeping apart. At some point, the older one, only by a year, started waking up every single night screaming and crying uncontrollably. We were concerned but didn't initially think much of it, considering she may just be starting to have nightmares or going through some night terror phase. At first it was just uncontrollable crying, but then she gradually started developing this same story over and over about the man trying to get her. The man did this, the man did that, but always that he was trying to get her. It started becoming really concerning because it was consistent, and she was truly terrified and almost never wanted to go in the room. The younger daughter wasn't sharing this experience, so we chalked it up to dreams and nightmares. It got bad enough that I was convinced maybe there was some pervert sneaking up to her window every night trying to get her to come out, or whatever it was I conjured up in my head. But a few nights I stayed up sitting in their room waiting and nothing. One of the nights she woke up crying and was running a really high fever. We were up all night with her trying to comfort her. It wasn't until the next day we saw she had a scratch across her cheek. My wife noticed it and kinda casually did that mom type, "Aw sweetie, did you scratch yourself?" And without skipping a beat, my youngest just calmly said, "No mama, the man scratched her last night." This was the first and only time the little one ever mentioned knowing anything about that. My wife and I were just super creeped out. Anyway, this went on for a little while and we hadn't really considered ourselves superstitious people, so we still wrote it off as nightmares. Fast forward a couple months and the whole thing kinda subsided. My wife had a friend come visit for a weekend with her daughter of around the same age. Since my kids had a queen bed, we set them up for the weekend in their room. We put our girls to bed in our room and she got her daughter to sleep in theirs. This was the first night and we stayed up chatting and having some drinks. A few hours in and we can hear her daughter crying in the room. Again, didn't think much of it, seeing as most kids that age cry over various reasons. She excused herself and spent a good while trying to soothe her back to sleep. Eventually she gave up and just brought her back out to the living room and held onto her, trying to rock her back to sleep. We continued chatting and her daughter slowly kinda came around to small sobbing and snifflings. When she finally stopped, her mom continued to try to comfort her and asked her if she was okay. She kept saying this was very unlike her. We still hadn't made any grand connections, but I shit you not, this little girl looks up at her mother and says word for word, the man in the room was trying to get me." I would have loved to have captured the look on my wife and I's face. The little girl refused to sleep in that room the remainder of that stay and they couched it. We began sharing this story with our friends, and one of our friends' mother decided to come by and do a bunch of hippie oil, stone, and burning sage thing to the house, and haven't had anything else go down, but that story still creeps me to my bones. Not from my family, but still very scary. These were the friends of my grandmother. In the 1970s, a family went on a sailboat celebrating the father's birthday. When they were at open sea, they all jumped into the water to swim. After the last person on the boat jumped, they reached to go back to the boat. They had forgotten about the ladder. When you jump to the sea from a boat, you're supposed to put a ladder so you can get back on, because the boat was too high to reach from the water, and it didn't have a little platform on the back. They tried to get back on the boat for hours, but they all drowned. It was June 4th, 2017. I was alone at home since my parents had gone out to do the monthly shopping. My phone rang at around 4 p.m. It was my aunt. She was my dad's second cousin, but we were very close. Anyways, I pick up the phone and we chat for like 20 minutes or so. Everything is completely normal, and then I end the phone call. When my parents come home after 5 or 10 minutes, my mom was sobbing and my dad had tears in his eyes. My aunt had killed herself earlier that afternoon. When I told them that I had just talked to her, they didn't believe me. So I went to show them the call logs. Guess what? My phone didn't work. It was new and had no problem, but it was never switched on after that. To this day, I'm creeped out about what happened and still don't know if it was a figment of my imagination or not. Alright, so my preschool teacher, who also ended up somehow changing jobs and becoming my 11th grade English teacher, had a super interesting life. Her mother had some super famous book. Her father worked high up in the government, but enough about her family. First, let me describe her to you. She had dark hair and blue eyes. You'll see why this matters in a minute. She told this story every single year to the new students in her class. When she was younger, she was driving through Arizona on a two-way road while her boyfriend at the time was following behind her on his motorcycle. For those who don't live in Arizona, certain stretches of it can be quite isolated and deserted. She said that they were on a long drive. It's been about 6 years since I was in her class, so details are fuzzy. But basically her and her boyfriend both knew the destination, where they were heading by memory, and eventually got separated by a few miles. A man who was behind her, in a Volkswagen Beetle, kept pulling up beside her into the other lane. No one was coming and motioning at her to pull over. She somewhat ignored him the first few times, but he kept doing it and began getting more frantic each time. She said that she believed that he spotted something wrong with her car, so she saw a parking lot off the road for a deserted gas station and pulled over. Once pulled over, she said that she instantly got an eerie feeling. The man was suspicious and kept telling her that he saw something wrong with her headlight and insisted she get out of the car so he could show her what he meant. Her boyfriend, who was a few miles behind her, eventually caught up and spotted her car at the sketchy gas station. Right as she was out of the car, her boyfriend began to pull in. As he did that, this man got into his car and sped off like his life depended on it. They later were able to identify that the man was Ted Bundy. She said she cannot imagine what would have happened to her if her boyfriend had been even another 3 miles behind her on the road. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like it, subscribe to the channel and share your similar stories in the comments. See you soon.